You didn't lose the old reality. It released you. The symptoms you felt aren't confusion, they're evidence. You already crossed into the version of yourself your future has been waiting for. But even though the shift has already occurred, there are steps your consciousness must take to steady this new timeline. And before you do that, you need to understand a few core principles that will anchor what has already begun. There comes a moment in every timeline where the old version of your life recognizes it has taken you as far as it can. Not because you forced your way out, and not because something collapsed, but because the frequency that once held you no longer matched the vibration you quietly grew into. What you experienced as an ending was in truth a release. A gentle unclasping from a reality that had completed its purpose. The shift did not begin with an event. It began with an inner coherence you didn't even realize you were forming. A reality does not dissolve through chaos. It dissolves through completion. When the field senses that your consciousness has aligned with a new quantum trajectory, the old environment relaxes its hold. Patterns that once felt solid begin to soften. Paths that once felt predetermined begin to lose their shape. It isn't rejection. It isn't loss. It is the moment when the fabric of a former timeline acknowledges that its contract has fulfilled itself. You didn't chase the new world you're stepping into. You resonated with it. And because of that resonance, the structures of your previous timeline recognized that they could no longer contain the level of awareness you were beginning to embody. The release was simply the natural response of a reality that understood it was no longer the one that matched you. In quantum terms, the field reorganized around the frequency you had quietly stabilized, presenting you with an entirely new arrangement of possibility. When a reality releases you, it's never abrupt. It moves with the precision of something that has been preparing in the background, long before your mind caught up. Subtle shifts in direction, quiet realignments. Moments where you realized something inside you no longer echoed the environments around you. These small inflection points were not signs of instability, but signs of internal clarity. They were the first indications that your timeline had already begun to change its shape. This moment is not about looking back or analyzing the mechanics of what unfolded. It is about remembering that consciousness always leads and timelines always follow. When the inner field reaches a new level of coherence, reality responds with unwavering accuracy. What once surrounded you stepped aside because something more aligned had already stepped forward. You didn't have to fight for it. You didn't have to earn it. You only had to become the version of yourself that the new timeline could recognize. Now, you stand at the threshold, not of something you must chase, but something you have already entered. The old reality released you because you outgrew its frequency, and the moment it let go was the moment you finally arrived where you were always meant to be. If you resonated with this, subscribe so you receive our future videos. Now let's begin. There were moments you brushed off as nothing. Moments so quiet and so subtle that you never imagined they were signaling a quantum change already underway. You noticed a slight distance from certain situations, a soft drift from conversations that once felt natural, an unexplained clarity rising in the background of your awareness. These weren't random fluctuations. They were early vibrations of a timeline beginning to shift around you. Tiny ripples that hinted at a frequency you were already starting to match. You may remember feeling a strange neutrality toward things that once pulled at your emotions. Not emptiness, but a gentle recalibration. The field around you was adjusting, reorganizing itself in response to the new resonance forming in your inner space. What seemed like disinterest was actually the first sign that your system was no longer in the same harmonic relationship with your former reality. You were already vibrating at a rate that invited a different experience, and the old one simply couldn't hold the same weight. There were also moments of unusual stillness, brief pauses where something inside you felt suspended. You might not have understood them at the time, but these pauses were your consciousness synchronizing with a new timeline. When you felt that quiet pull, that mild sense of stepping back, it wasn't retreat. It was the frequency of your environment adjusting itself to meet you. The old patterns were loosening their grip, not through force, but through mismatch. And the new patterns were beginning to take shape, long before you recognized their emergence. Even your intuitive nudges started to sound different. They carried a clarity that wasn't there before, a directness that felt almost foreign. This clarity was the field's way of signaling alignment, a soft confirmation that your vibration was beginning to resonate with a higher order. These intuitive sparks weren't warnings or impulses. They were early messages from a timeline you hadn't yet stepped into consciously, but had already become compatible with energetically. You may have noticed small moments where time felt slightly stretched, as if something in the air had slowed down. This sensation was not a disruption, it was coherence forming. As your frequency stabilized at a new level, the space around you responded by shifting its rhythm. These temporal distortions were subtle reflections of the quantum field, reorganizing itself in real time, creating space for the timeline you were moving toward. The truth is, these signs were never meant to alarm you. They were confirmations, gentle, precise indicators that the shift wasn't sudden. It was gradual, patient, and guided by the natural intelligence of vibration matching vibration. You did not leap blindly. You were brought forward step by step, frequency by frequency, into the reality you now occupy. Looking back, you can see that these subtle signals were not random moods or passing states. They were the quiet evidence that your consciousness had already begun its transition. Your system felt the shift before your mind could name it, and every one of those small moments was the field's way of saying you were already on your way. There is a quiet intelligence in the way a higher timeline draws you toward it. It never pushes. It never forces. It simply holds a frequency so coherent that your system can't help but begin to resonate with it. What you interpreted as detachment from the old was not rejection, and it was not escape. It was the unmistakable pull of something more aligned, something whose vibration matched the truth you were finally ready to inhabit. Think of it as a gentle gravitational shift. When a new timeline forms resonance with your inner field, it exerts a kind of subtle magnetism. You don't move toward it out of effort. You move because the space around you begins to reorganize in its direction. The old world doesn't fade because it failed you. It fades because the frequency that once held you can no longer contain the expansion you've stepped into. The feeling of being pulled away is simply the sensation of orbit changing. Your consciousness settling into a trajectory that was waiting for you long before you could name it. This pull isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive as a sudden collapse or a violent break. It shows itself as a soft reorientation, a quiet redirection of your attention, your choices, your inner impulses. You begin to notice that certain paths no longer open the way they used to. Certain conversations no longer hold the same weight. Certain environments feel slightly farther away, even if nothing visible has changed. These aren't moments of loss. They're moments of alignment. The field is shifting its center of gravity, drawing you toward a vibration that mirrors your emerging clarity. A higher timeline doesn't demand that you leave anything behind. It simply invites you into resonance. And the moment you match even a fragment of its frequency, it starts guiding you forward with an accuracy that feels almost inevitable. What looked like detachment was actually attunement. You were tuning yourself, consciously or not, to a reality that held more coherence, more truth, more expansion. The pull you felt was the natural response of energy, meeting its counterpart across timelines. It's important to recognize that this attraction is never accidental. In quantum terms, you cannot be pulled by any frequency you are not already beginning to harmonize with. That means the timeline drawing you was not foreign. It was familiar in a way you couldn't yet articulate. A resonance your deeper consciousness recognized long before the rest of you caught up. The shift began the moment that recognition occurred, even if you didn't consciously notice it. So when you felt yourself drifting from what once felt solid, it wasn't because something was wrong, it was because something was right. Your field was aligning with a new rhythm, a new coherence, and the old reality simply couldn't accompany you at that vibration. You weren't being pushed out of anything, you were being invited into something, and the pull you felt was the clearest sign that the new timeline was already opening, already calling you, already ready for the version of you who could finally hear it. You moved because the future you resonated. You moved because the field recognized you. You moved because the higher timeline chose you the moment you matched its frequency. There is a particular stillness that arrives when you step into a new frequency. A kind of quiet clarity that doesn't announce itself, but subtly shapes the way you sense the world. You may not have noticed the moment it happened, because the shift didn't arrive with noise or intensity. It arrived as a gentle recalibration of the field around you, a soft alignment that signaled your entrance into a new quantum environment. This frequency isn't something you force yourself into. It's something your consciousness naturally finds when it begins to resonate with a higher order of coherence. This new timeline holds a different texture, a different rhythm. Its vibration is more refined, more spacious, more precise. You might feel it not as a sensation, but as a quality in the air around your awareness. A subtle expansion, a broadened field of possibility. The quantum landscape you've stepped into organizes itself differently than the one you came from. It responds more quickly. It reflects your inner shifts with greater immediacy. It creates openings where the old reality showed only repetition. This isn't because you are pushing harder. It's because the frequency you're now aligned with operates at a higher level of responsiveness. In this new environment, the communication between your inner field and the external world becomes almost seamless. The thoughts you hold, the intentions you whisper inwardly, the vibrations you maintain, they move through this timeline with less resistance, as if the space itself recognizes and supports what arises from coherence. You may sense an ease in how possibilities form, not because everything becomes effortless, but because the frequency of this timeline amplifies whatever resonates with clarity. Where the old reality echoed your doubts, this one mirrors your alignment. The shift in frequency also changes the way time feels. Not in a dramatic or disorienting way, but in a soft, almost poetic manner. Moments seem to stretch just enough for you to sense the intelligence behind them. Pauses feel more spacious, and movement feels more intentional. This is the nature of higher frequencies. They hold time differently. They don't rush. They don't collapse. They create room for synchronicity to breathe. You may also notice that the new frequency carries a kind of quiet luminosity. It's not visual, and it's not emotional. It's vibrational. It feels like a subtle brightness beneath your awareness, a gentle hum that wasn't present before. This vibrational lightness is the signature of coherence. It is what lets you sense that the timeline you're standing in has a different architecture. One built not from habit or repetition, but from alignment and possibility. Understanding this is important, not so you can control it, but so you can recognize it. Recognition itself deepens your resonance with the new frequency. When you acknowledge the shift, the field responds by revealing more of its structure. It begins to show you pathways that were invisible in the old timeline, not because they didn't exist, but because you weren't vibrating at the level required to perceive them. You are not trying to fit into this new frequency. You are already inside it, and as you become aware of its quiet intelligence, its refined vibration, and its responsive nature, you begin to understand the kind of reality that now surrounds you, one shaped not by effort, but by resonance. Give this video a like to activate your positive vibration and pay attention to what I'm about to say next. There is a place you pass through that feels neither like where you came from, nor where you are going. It is quiet, weightless, almost formless. A space where the old timeline has already loosened its grip, but the new one has not yet revealed its full shape. This in-between is not a mistake or a void. It is a threshold, an energetic crossing where your consciousness adjusts to the vibration of the timeline you've already stepped toward. It is the moment when reality pauses just long enough for you to notice that something essential is being rewritten. In this space, nothing feels urgent. There is no pressure to understand or define what is happening. Instead, there is a soft suspension, as if the quantum field is holding you lightly, while the next layer of your experience organizes itself. The in-between is where the old patterns no longer resonate, yet the new ones are still forming their coherence. It is the gentle reorientation of your inner frequency, aligning with a reality that is becoming more vivid with every breath you take. You aren't meant to push through this phase. You aren't meant to rush it or fear it. The in-between exists because every timeline shift carries a moment of recalibration. It is the natural pause between vibrations. The brief interval where your inner field releases outdated frequencies and subtly attunes itself to the rhythm of the world you are entering. Nothing is wrong in this space. Nothing is missing. You are simply standing between symphonies, hearing the last notes of one fade, while the first notes of another gather in the background. Here, your perception may feel soft, spacious, and slightly untethered. Not because you're lost, but because you're no longer anchored to the structures that once defined your reality. You're not drifting. You're transitioning. You're standing in the doorway of a new quantum environment, one that responds to coherence rather than familiarity. The in-between is the bridge through which every meaningful shift passes. The space where an old timeline completes and a new one begins to hold you. This threshold also carries a unique kind of clarity. Without the noise of the old timeline or the momentum of the new one, your awareness becomes quiet enough to feel the subtle currents moving beneath your experience. You begin to sense the direction of your unfolding, not through thought, but through vibration. The absence of answers isn't a sign of confusion. It is a sign that the field is arranging them in a language you can feel before you can articulate. The beauty of the in-between is that it asks nothing from you except presence. It is not a test and it is not a delay. It is the gentle settling of energy as your reality aligns itself with the frequency you now carry. This is the space where you learn to trust the intelligence of transition, where you discover that becoming is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it is a quiet shift in the air, a subtle widening of possibility, a silent recognition that the next timeline is already waiting just beyond the threshold you are now crossing. There comes a moment when the life you once inhabited begins to feel distant. Not because anything dramatic occurred, but because the vibration that shaped it no longer resonates with the frequency you now carry. What once felt familiar begins to feel muted, as if the echo of that world can no longer reach you with the same clarity. This shift is not a rejection of your past. It is the natural movement of consciousness, releasing what no longer aligns with the rhythm of your unfolding. Your old life feels different because its frequency was built around versions of you that have quietly dissolved. The patterns that structured that reality were calibrated to vibrations you no longer emit. As your internal field rises into greater coherence, anything that doesn't match that coherence begins to fade, like a station you've tuned away from. Nothing has gone wrong. This is simply what happens when your energy outgrows its previous architecture. The spaces you once occupied were aligned with an older vibration. And as that vibration softens, the environments tied to it soften as well. You're not losing your past. You're stepping into a resonance that your past cannot fully hold. This doesn't mean there's anything incomplete about where you came from. It simply means its role is complete. The sense of not belonging isn't a failure to fit in. It's a sign that your frequency has shifted to a degree where certain experiences can no longer anchor to you. You're not being pushed away. You're drifting naturally toward the vibration that reflects your current state. This feeling is often mistaken for disconnection, but it is actually clarity. When a timeline no longer matches your vibration, it loses its sense of home. Because home is not a place. It is a frequency. It is the feeling of alignment between your inner field and your outer environment. When that alignment changes, the old landscape becomes too small to contain the truth you're now living. You step into larger resonance, and the old world gently releases you because it cannot expand in the direction you're headed. As the mismatch grows, you may notice that certain roles, conversations, or commitments feel like closed circuits. They no longer generate energy. They simply repeat. This is not stagnation. It is the field showing you that these connections were built for a vibration you no longer sustain. The shedding isn't forced. It's organic. You are not abandoning anything. You are simply becoming incompatible with what once felt familiar. This transition is a sign of movement, not loss. When your vibration changes, reality reorganizes itself around that new frequency. What fades is not meant to follow you, and what remains is what can meet you where you are now. The sense of not belonging is actually the first confirmation that you have already stepped into the resonance of a new timeline, one that feels expansive in ways the old one never could. Your old life no longer feels like home because you are no longer living from the frequency that built it. You have entered a space that is broader, clearer, and more aligned with the vibration you now hold. A vibration that is already shaping the world you are stepping into. There are chapters of your life that seemed heavy when you were living them. Seasons where the weight of experience felt disproportionate to anything you could understand at the time. Yet beneath the surface of those moments, something precise was unfolding. Not as punishment, not as misfortune, but as preparation. What felt difficult was not random. It was the field conditioning your system to hold a level of coherence you would later require. Every challenge carried a structure, an intelligence, a hidden rhythm designed to expand your capacity to receive and maintain a higher vibration. You weren't being tested. You were being strengthened. Not in the dramatic sense of endurance, but in the subtle sense of regulation. Your nervous system, your emotional field, your inner calibration. All of it was being refined to operate at a higher frequency. When you pass through density, you learn how to stay grounded in clarity, even when the external world feels uncertain. You learn how to stabilize your internal field, regardless of what's happening around you. These abilities aren't taught through ease. They are sculpted gently through contrast. The seasons that felt overwhelming were shaping your energetic resilience. They were teaching your system how to remain open without collapsing, how to remain receptive without becoming overloaded, how to remain aligned even when circumstances seem to move in unexpected directions. Every moment that asked you to breathe deeper, to slow down, to reassess, was actually guiding your field into greater coherence. What seemed like stagnation was often integration. What seemed like pressure was the strengthening of pathways that would later allow you to hold a more refined vibration without fracturing. There is a design to this process. When you are preparing to enter a higher frequency, your system must learn how to contain more light, more clarity, more possibility. It must learn how to maintain steadiness in the presence of expansion. Without that preparation, the new vibration would feel overwhelming. But because you moved through seasons that stretched your emotional and energetic capacity, you became capable of sustaining resonance at a level that once would have felt unreachable. Each difficult moment carried a lesson in regulation. Not regulation through suppression, but regulation through presence. You were learning how to stay with yourself, how to feel fully without losing yourself, how to navigate intensity without shutting down. This skill is essential for entering a new vibration, because higher frequencies amplify everything. Intuition becomes louder, synchronicity becomes faster, internal clarity becomes sharper. The groundwork for navigating that amplification was laid during the seasons you thought were breaking you. In reality, they were building you. Looking back with this understanding, you can see that nothing was wasted. The moments that pushed you inward were the same moments that expanded your bandwidth. The days that felt unclear were the same days that refined your inner sensitivity. The challenges that caused you to slow down were the ones that taught you how to listen beneath the noise. These seasons didn't prepare you to survive, they prepared you to resonate. They created the structure within you that could hold a higher frequency without distortion. And now, as you step into a more coherent timeline, you can feel the strength that was forged quietly in the background, the strength that makes this new vibration not only reachable but sustainable. There is a quiet moment at the edge of what you believed you could hold, a moment you may have labeled as breaking, when in truth it was something far more precise. What felt like collapse was not the end of your strength. It was the point where your old trajectory could no longer continue. It was the threshold where one timeline softened and another opened, not through force but through inevitability. The breaking point wasn't a failure of your path. It was the place where the path gently changed its shape. In every quantum shift, there is a moment when the structures of the previous timeline reach their limit. Not because you did something wrong, but because the vibration that sustained them can no longer match the frequency rising within you. When the old frequency becomes too small for your expanding field, reality doesn't push you forward. It reorganizes itself. What you interpreted as a collapse was the exact moment the old pattern released its hold, making space for a new coherence to form. This doorway doesn't announce itself with clarity or comfort. It arrives softly, disguised as exhaustion, stillness, or a sense that you can't continue in the direction you once thought you should. It isn't a moment of defeat. It's a moment of truth. The old pattern dissolves because it has fulfilled its role, and your system instinctively knows it cannot carry you into the next phase. The quantum field responds to this recognition by presenting a new trajectory, one that you may not see yet, but have already stepped toward. The breaking point is where linear narratives end and nonlinear pathways begin. In linear time, it looks like interruption. In nonlinear understanding, it is alignment. The moment when the old route becomes impossible is the moment when the new timeline becomes available. This is why everything felt as though it paused. You weren't breaking down. You were being redirected. The field was guiding you into a reality that matched a frequency you had already begun to embody. Gently, without your awareness, the future timeline folded itself closer. It wasn't waiting for you to fix anything. It was waiting for the old momentum to lose its grip so it could reveal itself. The threshold you crossed wasn't dramatic, it was natural. When a vibration changes, the path that once made sense no longer connects to the one you're meant to walk. The breaking point simply marks the moment when continuing the old way becomes impossible. Not out of weakness, but out of misalignment. Looking back, you can see that this doorway appeared precisely when it needed to. If you had continued carrying the old rhythm, you wouldn't have had the space to perceive the new one. If the old structure hadn't released you, the new frequency couldn't have welcomed you. The moment you thought everything fell apart was the moment everything quietly reconfigured. Your breaking point was not the end of your story. It was the opening into a timeline that could finally hold the vibration you were destined to live in. There is a deeper intelligence beneath everything you experience. A quiet designer that shapes reality not through force, but through the frequency you hold. Consciousness is not simply something you use to interpret the world. It is the very field that arranges the world around you. Every timeline you step into is a direct reflection of the vibration your awareness generates. This isn't metaphor. It's the subtle quantum-level architecture of how your reality forms itself in response to you. Think of consciousness as a signal constantly broadcasting into the field. This signal doesn't travel in straight lines or follow linear logic. It moves in waves, subtle patterns of vibration that the quantum field responds to with remarkable precision. When you shift the quality of your awareness, the calmness you carry, the clarity you hold, the frequency you maintain, the field mirrors that shift by reorganizing the structure of your timeline. Your outer world is not disconnected from your inner state. It is an extension of it. The timelines you encounter are not random. They are selected through resonance. When your consciousness vibrates at a certain frequency, the field aligns you with experiences that match that vibration. It is less like choosing a path and more like tuning a signal. Wherever your inner frequency lands, the corresponding reality begins to take shape. This is why subtle internal shifts can produce profound external changes. The field isn't reacting to your thoughts as isolated fragments. It is responding to the overall vibration they create. This is where the bridge between science and metaphysics becomes clear. In quantum understanding, particles do not arrange themselves until they are observed. But observation is not just seeing. It is consciousness interacting with possibility. Your awareness influences the structure of potential, inviting certain outcomes to crystallize and allowing others to dissolve. The moment you bring presence to a possibility, the field begins to organize around it. Timelines are not fixed routes waiting to be discovered. They are living configurations responding to the signal of your consciousness. This means that the world you step into is shaped not by willpower, but by coherence. When your inner field becomes stable, when your vibration becomes clear, the quantum landscape surrounding you shifts to match that clarity. Events align, opportunities appear, patterns reorganize. And they do so not through randomness, but through resonance. Consciousness creates the architecture, and the field builds the structure. This is why certain realities fall away as your awareness evolves. When you no longer vibrate at the frequency that sustained them, they simply cannot remain intact. Their structure dissolves because the architect, your consciousness, has changed its design. Likewise, new pathways appear not because you stumbled upon them, but because the vibration you now carry allows them to exist in your experience. Understanding this changes everything. You no longer look at your life as something happening to you. You see it as something emerging from you. The timelines you will encounter next are not predetermined. They are already forming in response to the frequency you hold in this very moment. Consciousness is the architect. Frequency is the blueprint. The field is the builder. And reality is the structure that takes shape around the vibration you consistently emit. There is a quiet truth beneath every shift you've ever experienced. The reality you step into is determined by the identity you inhabit. Not the identity defined by roles or labels, but the vibrational signature of who you believe yourself to be at your core. Identity is not a concept, it is a frequency. And that frequency is what determines which timeline becomes available to you. Every identity carries its own vibration. When you hold a certain self-concept, even subtly, even quietly, it sends a signal into the field. That signal interacts with the quantum landscape around you, aligning you with experiences that match its frequency. The world doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to who you are being. And being is simply the frequency your consciousness stabilizes in. This is why internal shifts matter more than external effort. When your vibration changes, your timeline selection changes with it. The field reorganizes your path, not because you forced it to, but because your identity cannot exist in a reality that doesn't mirror it. Each version of you corresponds to a different configuration of possibilities. When you inhabit a new internal state, the timeline that matches that state becomes the one you naturally move toward. Think of identity as the tuning fork of your reality. Whatever note it holds, the field echoes. Whatever frequency it emits, the timeline aligns. When your inner state rises into greater coherence, the world around you begins to reflect that coherence through the experiences it offers. And when your inner field shifts into dissonance, the realities that can connect to you shift accordingly. But none of this is random. It is the natural interaction between the vibration you carry and the quantum structure responding to it. The most powerful aspect of this truth is that identity isn't fixed. It's fluid, expansive, and responsive. Every moment of awareness refines it. Every insight shifts its tone. Every decision shapes its resonance. When you change the way you see yourself, not on the surface, but at the level of vibration, you alter the frequency that determines which timeline becomes accessible. This isn't about pretending to be something else. It's about remembering the version of yourself whose frequency aligns with the reality you're moving into. As your inner field becomes more coherent, the identity that once tethered you to certain patterns naturally dissolves. Not through force, but through mismatch. You no longer vibrate at the level that sustained those versions of you. And as that resonance fades, the timelines connected to that identity fade with it. In their place, new trajectories come into view. Ones that match the tone of the self you are beginning to embody. The mechanism is simple but profound. Identity selects reality. The frequency of who you believe yourself to be tunes you into the timeline that reflects that belief. When your inner vibration shifts, the architecture of your world shifts with it. You are not navigating an endless maze of possibilities. You are stepping into the exact timeline that matches the frequency you hold right now. Identity isn't just the story you tell yourself. It's the vibration that shapes your reality. And the moment that vibration changes, the timeline you align with changes too. There are moments when reality speaks to you in ways that don't use language. A number that repeats. A phrase you overhear at the perfect moment. An unexpected alignment that feels too precise to dismiss. These are not coincidences. They are the field responding to your vibration, reflecting back the frequency you are holding with quiet accuracy. Synchronicity is not an external message sent randomly into your path. It is communication generated from the resonance you emit. Think of the field as a living mirror. It does not speak in sentences. It speaks in patterns. When your vibration shifts, the quantum environment around you begins to reorganize in response. What appears as synchronicity is simply the field presenting you with reflections of your current frequency, so you can recognize where you truly are. These moments do not guide you in a linear way. They attune you, subtly aligning your awareness with the timeline you're moving into. Synchronicity occurs when your inner signal becomes coherent enough for reality to echo it. It is the byproduct of resonance. When your vibration stabilizes at a certain frequency, the field sends back corresponding experiences that match that vibration, not as rewards, not as predictions, but as confirmation that your consciousness and your environment are beginning to operate in harmony. The field is always communicating. Synchronicity is simply the form you're able to notice. These moments often appear gentle, almost understated. They don't demand attention. They invite recognition. You may see a symbol that feels significant for reasons you can't quite explain. You may meet someone at the exact moment their presence supports your unfolding. You may encounter a message that aligns perfectly with the vibration you've been quietly carrying. The precision of these experiences is not accidental. It is the natural rhythmic dialogue between your frequency and the quantum landscape responding to it. Synchronicity doesn't tell you what to do, it shows you where you already are. When a pattern appears repeatedly, it means your vibration is interacting with the field consistently enough for the reflection to stabilize. When the signs become more frequent, it means your resonance is becoming more coherent. When a message arrives at the exact moment you need it, it means the field is matching your frequency with remarkable sensitivity. This communication is subtle because the field does not impose direction. It offers alignment. Synchronicity is the field's way of saying, you are in rhythm with the timeline unfolding beneath your awareness. It confirms the path you're already walking, rather than instructing you to change it. The more you notice these patterns, the more attuned you become to the conversation happening between your consciousness and the environment surrounding it. The beauty of synchronicity is that it grows louder as your coherence increases, not in volume, but in clarity. The reflections become more precise, the patterns become more noticeable, the timing becomes unmistakable. This is how the field communicates, through resonance, through repetition, through the unmistakable feeling that something in the universe is aligning itself with you. Synchronicity is not magic. It is not mystery. It is the natural language of vibration interacting with the quantum field. It is the quiet confirmation that your inner frequency is shaping the reality you are stepping into, moment by moment, pattern by pattern, sign by sign. There is a version of you that has always existed just beyond the edges of your awareness. A presence that feels less like something you're becoming and more like something you've been slowly remembering. This presence isn't distant or separate from you. It is the resonance of your most coherent state, the quiet echo of the self that has been guiding you long before you had language for it. When you sense this deeper version of yourself, it doesn't feel like discovery. It feels like recognition, as if a truth you once knew is rising gently back to the surface. This echo appears not as a voice, but as a vibration. It's the subtle clarity you feel when something aligns without effort. It's the calm certainty that arrives before understanding. It's the instinctive knowing that doesn't need to be justified. These moments aren't coincidences. They're glimpses of the frequency that belongs to the you who sees farther, feels deeper, and moves from a place of inner truth. This presence is not a future self. It is a timeless one. A version of you that has always been intact within the quantum field of your consciousness. When you sense that quiet intelligence rising within you, it doesn't point outward. It draws your attention inward, toward a vibration that feels strangely familiar. There's a softness to it, a depth, a kind of stillness that carries more wisdom than any thought. This is the echo, not loud, not demanding, but steady. It's the part of you that already understands the path you're on, because it exists beyond linear progression. It remembers what you're unfolding into, not because it has seen the future, but because it has never been separate from it. The echo shows up in subtle ways, a sudden clarity that dissolves confusion, a sense of peace that doesn't match your circumstances, a quiet pull toward choices that feel aligned, without needing explanation. These experiences are not instructions. They are reflections of the vibration you are beginning to inhabit more consistently. They come from the part of your consciousness that holds a wider perspective, the part that operates beyond the limits of doubt or hesitation. This presence doesn't push you to change. It simply reminds you of what has always been true. It invites you to sense the frequency of who you are when you're not tangled in old patterns or borrowed expectations. In its vibration, you feel spaciousness, coherence, and a kind of gentle power that isn't tied to achievement. It is the vibration of authenticity, the resonance of the self that doesn't need to strive because it already exists in clarity. As you become more aware of this echo, you start to notice how it subtly influences your choices, not through force, but through recognition. You're drawn toward what matches its vibration and naturally distance yourself from what doesn't. This isn't effort, it's resonance. The echo serves as a quiet compass, guiding you through your inner landscape with a kind of effortless precision. And even though this presence feels elevated, it is not separate from you. It is you, the version untouched by confusion, unshaken by doubt, unburdened by narratives that were never yours. When you feel that quiet clarity rising, you are not reaching upward. You are remembering upward. You are reconnecting with the resonance that has always belonged to you, waiting patiently beneath the noise of every timeline you have ever walked. There was a moment, quiet enough to miss, when something inside you shifted its orientation. It didn't arrive with intensity, and it didn't announce itself with clarity. It was subtle. A single, precise pivot in the way your consciousness resonated with the world around you. You may not have recognized it at the time, but this was the instant your vibration matched the frequency of the timeline you are now inhabiting. This was the click, not an event, but a resonance. a gentle alignment that changed everything without demanding anything. The click happens when an internal truth becomes louder than the noise that once surrounded it. It's the moment a deeper clarity rises into your awareness, even if you can't articulate it. Something in you quietly decides, even without words, that the old pattern no longer defines your direction. This decision doesn't feel like effort. It feels like release, a soft exhale, a shift from resistance into coherence. And in that shift, the field responds. You might remember a moment where you felt an unexplainable certainty, a sensation that didn't come from thought, but from recognition. It could have been a breath, a feeling of openness, a gentle sense of relief. Something that let you know, without any evidence, that the path ahead had changed its texture. That was the frequency adjusting. That was the vibration of your consciousness, aligning with a new timeline. This alignment is not dramatic because it doesn't happen at the surface. It happens in the deeper layers of your awareness, the layers where your true resonance lives. When the click occurs, it doesn't feel like a leap. It feels like a returning, as if your inner field finally caught up to a truth that's been waiting for you. It is an instant of coherence, where the internal and external begin to vibrate in unison, even if nothing visible changes right away. The moment you clicked into alignment, you weren't deciding what your life would become. You were matching the frequency of what it had already become energetically. This is how timelines shift. Not through forceful intention, but through the quiet moment when your inner vibration aligns with a new possibility so completely that the old one can no longer hold you. It is the quantum equivalent of recognition, a frequency locking into place. You may not recall an exact second, but you can sense the before and after. Before, things felt slightly out of rhythm, as though you were walking against the grain of your own energy. After, something softened. The resistance loosened. The path felt less obstructed. The world around you responded differently, not because it changed first, but because your resonance did. The click is the internal signal that the timeline has already shifted. What's remarkable is that this pivot was not a choice made from pressure or effort. It was a natural culmination of everything your consciousness had been quietly refining. The click occurs when your vibration rises into coherence with a higher frequency of experience. And from that moment forward, even if nothing seemed different on the surface, reality had already begun rearranging itself around the frequency you now hold. The exact moment you clicked into alignment was the moment your inner field finally vibrated in harmony with the timeline you were always meant to enter. If you want someone important to you to also get into alignment, share this video with them. Now moving on. There is a quiet truth about the nature of timelines that becomes clear only after you've shifted into a new one. You do not return to an old reality unless you consciously align with it again. Nothing drags you backward. Nothing pulls you off course. Reality does not revert on its own. It responds to your vibration, to your choices, to the frequency you hold in the present moment. Once your inner field rises into resonance with a new timeline, the old one becomes unreachable unless you intentionally recreate the vibration that sustained it. This isn't about irreversibility. It's about resonance. Every timeline exists at a particular frequency, and you enter it by matching that frequency within yourself. When you moved into the reality you now occupy, it wasn't through force. It was through alignment. Your consciousness settled into a vibration that no longer matched the patterns of your previous world. And because of that, the experiences tied to that old vibration simply fell away. They didn't disappear. They just stopped being compatible with where you were resonating. To return to an old timeline, you would have to re-choose the beliefs, emotions, and inner states that created it. You would have to adopt the same vibrational posture that once shaped that version of your life. And you're not likely to do that. Not because you're forbidden from going back, but because you've outgrown the frequency that made that reality feel normal. You have tasted a broader perspective, a clearer vibration, a more aligned version of yourself. Returning would require shrinking into a pattern that no longer fits the truth you've discovered. This is the essence of choice-based manifestation. The reality you experience unfolds from the frequency you choose to occupy. Not once, but consistently. When you shifted timelines, it wasn't a single decision that moved you. It was the accumulation of countless internal choices, choosing clarity over confusion, presence over reactivity, truth over habit. Those choices built a vibration that no longer supported the old structures. And because of that, the old timeline can't hold you unless you deliberately diminish your frequency to match it again. You don't slip backward by accident. You don't return because of a moment of doubt or a passing emotion. Timelines are not fragile. They are vibrational structures. You remain in the one that matches your current internal state. And because your consciousness has expanded, because your awareness has deepened, because your vibration has shifted, the old world no longer feels like a place you could naturally inhabit. Even memories of that timeline feel different now, not because they've been erased, but because you are no longer the one who lived them. You can look back without falling back. You can remember without re-entering. Distance isn't created by time. It's created by frequency. You won't return to the old reality unless you choose to embody the vibration that once shaped it. And you are unlikely to do that, because the timeline you're in now is a reflection of the expansion you've already embraced. Returning is possible, but it isn't natural. What's natural is continuing to resonate where you are, in a reality that formed itself around the frequency you now hold. There is a new kind of steadiness your system is beginning to crave. Not because something is wrong, but because the vibration you now hold exists at a level of clarity that requires a different internal rhythm. Coherence is not discipline. It is not effort. It is the natural alignment that forms when your inner field matches the frequency of the timeline you have entered. And now that you're living in a reality shaped by higher resonance, your system is gently guiding you toward the stability that this vibration depends on. Coherence is the quiet state where your thoughts, emotions, and energy move in the same direction. It isn't perfection. It's harmony. It's the feeling of being internally aligned enough that the vibration you emit remains steady instead of scattered. This steadiness doesn't happen through force. It arises through awareness, through recognizing the subtle frequencies that support you and the ones that fragment your field. In this phase of your shift, your system is learning how to maintain that harmony with more consistency. The new timeline you've entered responds more sensitively to your vibration. Its structure is finer, more precise, more attuned to the frequency you carry. Because of that, your inner environment asks for a calmer rhythm, a softer internal space where your energy can settle without being pulled in opposing directions. Coherence becomes the foundation that allows you to fully experience the reality you've stepped into. Without it, the field feels louder and the world feels less defined. With it, everything sharpens into clarity. What your system is seeking now is simplicity, not restriction. Spaciousness. A quieter inner landscape where your vibration can remain steady enough for the timeline to mirror it accurately. You may notice a natural gravitation toward things that feel peaceful, grounding, or nourishing in a way they didn't before. This isn't preference, it's resonance. Your consciousness knows what supports the frequency you now carry, and it gently moves you toward those environments, interactions, and thoughts. Coherence also reveals itself through what no longer feels compatible. Certain conversations may feel too noisy. Certain dynamics may feel too heavy. Certain patterns may feel too fragmented. This isn't resistance, it's recognition. Your system is sensing which frequencies disrupt the stability of the vibration you've grown into. When something feels off, it's not because you are fragile. It's because your field is more refined now, more attuned to what aligns with your new reality. The coherence required of you now is not rigid. It is fluid, calm, and deeply natural. It asks you to remain aware of the vibration you are inhabiting and to allow your inner field to settle into a state that feels unified rather than divided. Coherence is a form of internal spaciousness, a way of holding your energy that keeps it whole, clear, and attuned to the frequency of the timeline you've already chosen. As your system adjusts to this new vibration, you'll feel a growing sense of ease in moments where your inner world becomes quiet enough for coherence to take shape. The quietness is not emptiness. It is alignment. It is the space in which your new reality can fully reflect the frequency you now embody. There are certain frequencies that no longer belong to the timeline you've entered. Quiet traces of older vibrations that once made sense, but now create subtle distortion in the field around you. This isn't about removing anything harshly. It isn't about cleansing or correcting. It's about gently recognizing the forms of energetic noise that no longer resonate with the clarity you're beginning to hold. Interference isn't something that attacks your vibration. It's simply anything that doesn't match the tone of the reality you've stepped into. Energetic noise often shows up as unnecessary tension in your awareness. Thoughts that loop without purpose. Emotional tones that don't feel rooted in the present. Or patterns of attention that scatter your frequency. These aren't signs of misalignment. They are reminders that parts of your inner landscape are still attuned to rhythms that belong to an older version of your reality. As your vibration rises, these lingering frequencies stand out more clearly, not because they have grown stronger, but because you have. Releasing interference isn't about force. It's about allowing. Noise dissolves when you stop feeding it with attention. It softens when you no longer engage with it out of habit. The quantum field responds to where your awareness rests, and when you place that awareness on what feels calm, grounding, or expansive, the old frequencies lose their coherence. They drift away naturally, like echoes fading into the distance. The release happens not through effort, but through gentle disengagement. Some interference comes from thought patterns that once offered you stability. These thoughts may still appear, but they no longer carry the same weight. Their vibration is slower, denser, less aligned with the frequency you hold now. When they arise, you don't need to confront them. Simply noticing that they don't match your current resonance is enough to loosen their influence. Awareness is the beginning of release. When you observe without attachment, the noise loses its structure. Other forms of interference come from environments or dynamics that no longer align with your inner field. You may sense this as a lack of clarity or a subtle heaviness in spaces that once felt neutral. This isn't judgment, it's resonance. Your vibration is letting you know what supports your current timeline and what disperses your energy. Releasing interference can be as simple as choosing environments that feel spacious and interactions that feel gentle. When you honor what your field gravitates toward, the noise fades on its own. The most effortless release comes from returning to the vibration that feels like home within you. That quiet center, the still point beneath your thoughts, carries the frequency of your new reality. When you settle into it, even briefly, anything that doesn't match that vibration begins to loosen and fall away. You don't need to push it out. You simply need to stop holding it in place. Interference dissolves in the presence of clarity. It cannot survive where coherence begins to form. As you continue moving through this new timeline, releasing energetic noise becomes less about removing and more about remembering. Remembering the vibration that feels true. Remembering the frequency that feels familiar. Remembering the quiet tone of the reality that has already welcomed you. There are moments so small you barely notice them. The way you respond to a thought. The tone you choose in silence. The direction your attention drifts when no one is watching. These subtle movements of your awareness carry more influence than you realize. They are not grand decisions or dramatic turning points. They are gentle signals you send into the field, confirming the vibration you intend to hold. These micro-choices are what begin to anchor the timeline you've already entered. A timeline stabilizes not through force or declarations, but through repetition of resonance. Each small choice becomes a quiet affirmation of the frequency you now inhabit. When you choose a thought that feels lighter, instead of returning to one that feels dense, you're not trying to improve anything. You're matching the vibration of the new reality. When you allow a moment of calm instead of feeding a familiar tension, you're strengthening the signal that aligns you with your current path. These subtle movements may seem trivial, but they are the building blocks of your lived frequency. Micro-choices form the rhythm of your day, and that rhythm is what the field responds to. Not the occasional burst of clarity, but the gentle consistency of the vibration you return to again and again. The timeline you've stepped into isn't held by intense effort. It's held by these quiet moments where your awareness naturally gravitates toward what resonates. Each time you lean toward what feels true, even in the smallest way, you reinforce the frequency that sustains your new reality. These choices don't need to be perfect. They just need to be honest. When you feel a thought rise that belongs to an older vibration, the choice isn't to fight it. It's to notice it and gently shift toward what aligns with the tone of where you are now. When you sense your attention drifting into old patterns, the shift isn't dramatic. It's a simple redirection toward clarity. These tiny movements accumulate, not as pressure, but as alignment. Over time, they become the silent architecture of your new timeline. You might notice that certain responses come more naturally now. A softness where there once was reactivity. A pause where there once was urgency. An openness where there once was resistance. These aren't transformations you forced. They're micro-choices, made easier by the frequency you've already stepped into. The new timeline supports these shifts, amplifying them gently, helping them settle into your daily experience. The smallest choices often carry the most weight because they arise from your true resonance rather than from conscious effort. They reflect the vibration you actually live in when you choose the option that feels calmer, clearer, or more aligned. Even in the quietest ways, you're telling the field, this is the frequency I choose to sustain. And the field responds accordingly. These micro-choices are not tasks. They are invitations, subtle opportunities to strengthen the vibration you have already matched. Each small alignment settles you deeper into the timeline that recognizes you. Each gentle shift affirms the reality you now inhabit. And without needing to force anything, these quiet decisions become the foundation that locks the new timeline into place, one subtle moment at a time. There is a way your future self moves through the world, not defined by effort or performance, but by the vibration carried through every action. This version of you expresses frequency through behavior, not by trying to become anything, but by naturally acting from the resonance that already exists within. Action, at its core, is the physical imprint of your internal field. It is how vibration translates itself into form. And as you settle into the timeline you've entered, you begin to sense the tone of the behaviors that belong to the version of you who already lives there. These behaviors are not grand or dramatic. They are subtle expressions of clarity. There is a steadiness in the way this version of you responds to life, a softness in the way choices unfold, a quiet precision in the way you move. None of it comes from striving. It comes from alignment, from inhabiting a frequency that naturally shapes your actions, without requiring you to push or persuade yourself. When you feel into the behavioral signature of your future self, you're not imagining a character you want to play. You're sensing the actions that match the vibration you're already beginning to embody. This version of you moves from a place of inner spaciousness. There is no urgency in the steps taken, because urgency belongs to misalignment. Here your actions feel intentional, without being forced. They unfold with a rhythm that feels grounded, almost inevitable. When you act from this vibration, you're not trying to control outcomes. You're expressing the frequency that aligns with the reality you're living. The behavior becomes a natural extension of the inner resonance, a physical reflection of the tone you carry. There is also a sense of gentleness to this behavioral signature. Not weakness, but ease. You speak with clarity because your vibration is clear. You engage with presence because your field is settled. You move in directions that feel open because your awareness recognizes them as aligned. Nothing feels exaggerated. Nothing feels strained. The behavior of your future self is subtle because coherence is subtle. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply exists. This version of you also carries a kind of internal quietness, not silence, but grounded certainty. Actions arise from that certainty, steps taken because they feel aligned, gestures made because they reflect truth, choices unfolding because they match the vibration already humming beneath your awareness. This is not imitation. It is resonance, expressing itself through motion. When you sense yourself acting from this space, it feels less like choosing and more like remembering. As you settle deeper into the timeline you've entered, these behaviors begin to appear naturally. You might notice yourself responding with more calm, moving with more intention, choosing with more clarity. These shifts aren't practiced. They are the natural expression of your current vibration. The behavioral signature of your future self is simply the way alignment behaves when it reaches the surface of your life. There is nothing you need to force. The actions that belong to this version of you arise effortlessly as your resonance stabilizes. They are the outward expression of the frequency that already defines the reality you now inhabit. And as you continue to embody that vibration, the behavior of your future self becomes the most natural thing in the world. Not because you're trying to become them, but because you're finally living as them. There are pathways in your life that will never appear until you begin to move. Not because they are hidden, but because they are created through your motion. A timeline does not lay itself out in advance. It forms in response to the direction you choose, shaping itself around the vibration you express through action. Movement is not about momentum or urgency. It is the gentle signal that tells the field you are ready to engage with what already resonates beneath the surface of your awareness. When you take even the smallest step, the quantum landscape adjusts. Possibilities that were previously dormant begin to activate. Potentials that seemed distant shift into proximity. None of this occurs before the movement. The field waits for your signal. The energetic announcement that you are willing to interact with the timeline you have entered. Only then does the path begin to reveal its shape. This is why clarity often arrives after motion, not before it. You don't move because you know. You know because you moved. Movement refines your vibration. When you act from a sense of alignment, even gently, the field receives a clearer version of your frequency. That clarity invites matching possibilities to come into view. A conversation opens a door. A choice creates a new intersection. A small step dissolves a limitation that once felt solid. Nothing is forced. The timeline simply responds, adjusting itself to the direction of your motion with quiet precision. The path is not revealed in full, because it doesn't exist in full until you interact with it. This is the nature of non-linear progression. Reality forms in real time, sculpted by the choices you make and the energy you bring into them. When you hesitate, the field remains still. Not frozen, but unexpressed. When you move, even slightly, the next segment of the path rises to meet you. It's like walking in soft light. The ground illuminates only when your foot reaches forward. Movement also communicates trust to the field, not blind faith, but vibrational openness. It signals that you are aligned enough to engage with what resonates, even without knowing every detail. The field responds to that openness by revealing options that match your tone. You begin to see connections you couldn't have predicted. You encounter moments that feel like subtle guidance. But these experiences arrive because you stepped forward first. This is why waiting for perfect clarity often keeps the path hidden. Clarity is a byproduct of motion, not a prerequisite for it. Every timeline shift requires interaction, not effort, but willingness. When you begin to move, the path itself adjusts to your frequency, revealing the next step only after the previous one is taken. It is a dynamic relationship between your vibration and the field. The path that belongs to you is already present, but dormant. It waits for your movement to awaken. It responds to your direction. It reveals itself in the exact rhythm you engage with it. And as you continue to move from a place of quiet resonance, the journey unfolds in a way that feels both unexpected and deeply familiar. Not because it was mapped out in advance, but because it was written through your motion, step by step, moment by moment. Transformation doesn't accelerate because you push harder or try to become something new. It accelerates the moment you recognize what is already unfolding within you. Recognition is a form of resonance. It is the instant when your awareness meets the truth of your current vibration. And that meeting amplifies the signal you're already sending into the field. When you recognize a shift, you strengthen it. When you name it inwardly, even without words, you bring its frequency into sharper focus. Recognition is powerful because it aligns your consciousness with what your energy has already chosen. It removes the gap between your inner field and your awareness. The moment you acknowledge the vibration you're holding, the field responds with greater precision. Reality reorganizes around clarity, not effort. And recognition is clarity in its purest form. It is the moment when you stop questioning whether the shift is happening and start seeing that it already has. This is why transformation often feels slow until a moment of realization occurs. Nothing external changes in that instant, yet everything feels different. That shift in perception isn't superficial. It is the vibrational confirmation that allows your timeline to reflect your inner state more directly. Recognition acts like a tuning fork that brings your awareness into harmony with the frequency you've been vibrating at beneath the surface. Once the two match, manifestation accelerates naturally. You may have noticed that when you recognize a new truth about yourself or your reality, a sense of ease follows. That ease is not emotional comfort. It is energetic alignment. It means your consciousness has finally caught up with the vibration you've been embodying for some time. When that alignment clicks, the field can reflect your new frequency without distortion. Your experiences shift faster. Pathways open more naturally, and synchronicities become more precise. Not because you tried harder, but because your awareness stopped resisting what was already true. Recognition also dissolves doubt. Doubt fragments energy. It splits your signal. But recognition unifies it. When you acknowledge the shift you've made, even quietly, even privately, your vibration becomes steadier. That steadiness is what allows the field to respond with coherence. Manifestation isn't speeded up by intensity. It's speeded up by clarity. And clarity is born in the moment you see yourself accurately. There is no need to declare anything or convince yourself of anything. Recognition doesn't force change, it reveals it. It is the inward turning of awareness that says, "This is where I am now." And in that simple acknowledgement, your timeline adjusts to meet the frequency of your truth. The external world begins to rearrange, not because you demanded it, but because you finally aligned your perception with your vibration. Transformation is not a future event. It is a present frequency. Recognition is how you step into that frequency fully, allowing the timeline to unfold with the speed and precision that match the vibration you already carry. There comes a moment in every shift when the vibration you've stepped into asks for one simple thing: acknowledgement. Not of where you're heading, but of where you already stand. A declaration is not a promise to become something. It is the quiet confirmation of what has already taken shape within you. It anchors the frequency you now hold, allowing the field to stabilize around the truth you are finally willing to name. This declaration is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a subtle statement that rises from the center of your awareness, carrying the resonance of something that feels unmistakably real. You are not declaring a desire. You are declaring a state of being, a vibration that has already formed itself in your consciousness and is now asking to be recognized in words. The moment you speak it, even silently. The field responds with clarity, aligning the timeline around the frequency embedded in that acknowledgement. A true declaration does not reach outward, it draws inward. It brings your awareness into coherence with the energy you've been embodying, often long before you noticed it. It is the moment when your inner field and your conscious mind meet in agreement. And in that meeting, the vibration becomes steady, not because you force it, but because you allow it to be named. This declaration is an anchor because it represents alignment between perception and energy. When you articulate the truth of the identity that has already emerged, you create a point of stillness inside yourself, a point the field can organize around. The timeline you've entered becomes clearer, not because it changes, but because you stop oscillating between what was and what is. The declaration closes the gap. You don't need elaborate language. You don't need symbolic gestures. The most powerful declaration is the one that feels undeniable. It may be only a sentence. It may be only a whisper in your awareness. But if it carries the frequency of authenticity, it becomes the stabilizing force of your new reality. It might sound like, "This is who I am now," or "I live from this vibration," or simply, "I recognize myself here." What matters is not the wording, it is the resonance beneath it. When the declaration matches the vibration you hold, the field responds instantly. Your reality aligns around that truth with a kind of quiet precision, because the signal you're sending is no longer divided. You have named what your energy has already chosen. The declaration does not move you forward. It roots you where you now belong. It establishes the frequency of your new identity as the baseline from which your experience unfolds. It tells the field, "This is my vibration," and the field mirrors it without hesitation. In this moment, nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to be pursued. The declaration is simply the final recognition that the shift has already occurred. You are no longer reaching for the version of yourself you hope to become. You are acknowledging the one you have already stepped into, anchoring the identity that now shapes the timeline you live within.